and thank you so much for joining me for this talk on how Caribbean podcasts, I'm just looking at, help to restart the future of digital in the Caribbean. So just to start us off, these are the three areas I'll be covering during the course of our conversation. And I'm hoping that I'll only take about 30 minutes and therefore leave us enough time for questions. So we'll start with just doing a quick overview of podcasting, then look at the state of digital in the Caribbean region. And then the last thing is why podcasts on the Caribbean tech space? Why should we be engaging in those sorts of activities? So the first section, so podcasting. Now there are various types of podcasts. However, the traditional one really speaks to digital audio files of spoken word that are available on the internet. And they're usually available for download to allow easy listening on personal devices. Typically, they are arranged in a series, and new episodes or installments are automatically received by subscribers. Now, I have some podcasting stats and trends, and depending on where you get the information, the stats are actually going to be wildly different. There really does not seem to be any single source that will give you accurate information. However, there are over 2 million podcasts, over 50,000 active podcasts on Apple in more than 100 languages. However, some of the big trends I think that we need to really look at, especially for us here in the Caribbean, is the fact that the podcast listenership is growing. And those who listen to podcasts listen to them quite a lot. As you can see, typically the average consumption is probably over eight episodes a week. So that's more than one a day. And the listenership is greatest among people under the age of 35. Now, why podcasting? It's readily available. You can listen to it whenever you want. And it requires no preparation. You can multitask. One of my favorite things about podcasts is the fact that I can listen to it while doing other things. I can do the dishes, exercise, and it's part of my lifestyle. It suits my lifestyle as opposed to me having to specifically sit down and pay complete attention to it. It's adaptable in the sense that it connects people and listeners. Because of the nature of the episodes, it tends to be episodes, so the host can get a lot of feedback from the audience and adjust the content accordingly. And I think one of the big things that I really like about podcasts coming out of the Caribbean tradition, we are oral people. We love to tell stories. Our history is oral. And therefore you find that even though we have the internet and all of those sorts of platforms, we have YouTube and the Facebooks and social media, that we still have a very high listenership for radio across the region. So you tend to find that people who are self-employed, your taxi drivers, your caterers, your seamstresses, people who might be working as a housekeeper, they listen to podcasts while they're listening to the radio while they're working. And you find that radio talk shows are very, very popular. And these are the sorts of activities and the source of a lot of the information and entertainment for people. And podcasts, which traditionally is an audio source of information, audio conversations, that fits in and dovetails very well into what we consider the oral tradition here in the Caribbean. So just moving on now to the state of digital. And I think some of the things that I just want to briefly touch on is the fact that we here in the region are well connected. The image that I have up on the screen is the submarine cable networks within the region. Almost every country has more than one cable. But also what you find on land is that we have very comprehensive networks in terms of wireless, so our mobile networks, and even the wired networks as well are pretty well developed as well in most Caribbean countries. Sorry. Another thing that we probably need to consider when we're looking at the state of digital in the Caribbean region is the fact that we have a high gross national income per capita. As you can see, I have most of the Caribbean countries in the table. Now, Guadeloupe, Martinique, and French countries, overseas French departments are not represented usually in the statistics. So I've inserted France here so that one would have a sense as to where France and its overseas territories would fit. But I also find it interesting to note that Cayman Islands has a higher per capita gross national income than even France. So you see here that we seem to be relatively wealthy. Most of our countries fall within what are considered high income or upper middle income countries. And here it is that you would think, though, that we should be having the very best, being able to afford everything and being able to enjoy all of what telecommunications and ICT can offer. However, across the region, affordability is still a challenge. And what you tend to find is that we still have a number of people who, if they're not necessarily living below the poverty line, they really do not have the income levels that would allow them to afford telecommunications, especially something like internet, which is becoming so important to us that on a consistent basis. So what you may find is that a lot of people in the region, probably over 80%, are still using like prepaid plans, the prepaid service plans, because you pay upfront. When it's finished, and if you can't afford it, then you don't buy again until you can afford it. So it's really a way to help people control their spending. And it really is a sign of the challenges that a lot of people are facing. And for many of us who have children and had to be had them at home during the pandemic, and depending on how many children you have at home, you may find that you may not be able to afford, and especially in low-income households, families cannot afford to have a device for every child so that they can then learn in whatever class they're in, and also to be able to afford the service, so internet service on a continuous basis that would allow them to be on class for 5 and 6 hours a day. So that's just something to consider. However, we are looking at the future, and what we tend to have is that we seem to have big dreams for the future. We have, in terms of outcomes, where we think we want to go, a single ICT space, something that CARICOM is advocated, 21st century government, smart homes, smart cities, smart countries, digital economies, knowledge-based society, sustainable development. And some of the key inputs that we need to leverage, some of them we do already, we have them all in the Caribbean, but maybe not to the same degree that we would need to have. So there's work to be done there, but we are looking at high-speed internet, AI and automation, big data analytics, and cloud technologies. And these 4 things are really considered to be the 4 key drivers of the 4th industrial revolution, which is a term that so many of us have heard already. However, to get from using those tools, high-speed internet, AI and automation, big data, cloud, we need to have other inputs. We need to have money, expertise, the political will, and the enabling environment to get us to the future that we envisage. So now, how does podcasting fit into all of this? I think, first of all, one of the things that we tend to take for granted here in the region is the broad range of expertise that we have here in the region. We tend to still look overseas for experts to come in to help us. However, even at this event, you have had very knowledgeable, experienced speakers, people who are from the region, whether or not born in the region of Caribbean parentage, and have a close affinity to the region. And these are things that we need to tap into from time to time. And that, I think, is one of the key things that we need to draw on. And also recognizing that we here in the Caribbean are unique. We are not like Europe, we're not like Africa, we are not like the South Pacific. We have our own sort of unique traits and our own charm and our own way of doing things and our own attitude. And this sometimes I think gets overlooked when we are looking outside all the time for experts. So for example, with my podcast, the ICT Pulse podcast, what I really try to do is to highlight the expertise that is available in the region. And even this, the understanding that we bring to the problems of the region. Now, for example, last year, like around, probably it was late September, October, I had representatives from the Central Bank of the Bahamas on the podcast, and we were talking about the digital currency that the central bank was going to issue in October. And one of the things that they said, I mean, yes, the digital currency would have been in trend, it would have been in planning for quite a while. But one of the things that drove the development of the digital currency in the Bahamas is the fact that they have, hundreds of islands, many of which are inhabited, but a lot of these islands do not have any bank branches on island. And so if people wanted to send money to their families on a particular island, they may not be able to just do so easily. They would have to probably send the cash to with somebody who was going to the island. And therefore you find that was just a great inconvenience and probably left those people a lot more isolated than they should be. You also then had Hurricane Dorian, which destroyed Grand Bahama and a few other islands, and people needed to be able to do various financial transactions. And here it is that your bank, your brick and mortar bank, was not available. It was damaged in everything that happened. So having digital currencies really was a solution to a unique situation in the Bahamas. So that's just something to consider. So the next thing I wanted us to touch on is that we are having siloed experiences here, and this is something that I think we can all appreciate. I am in Jamaica, and I really don't know very much about what's going on in Guadeloupe, or even in Barbados, or Trinidad, or St. Vincent. So we are all having different experiences, but they're not shared. We are having similar challenges, but we really don't know about it. And I think those are some of the things that we really need to consider as we try to look at our future as individual countries and as a region as a whole. And one of the things that, for example, I have been doing on the podcast, just to illustrate, is that, for the last few years, I've had this series called Know Your Neighbor. And what that series sought to do every month or once a month, we would explore the telecommunications and ICT space of a country. So it gave the guest who was going to be discussing the country, who usually was resident in the country, to help us to understand what the telecom space was like, how one does business, what might have been trends that one was experiencing locally, how telecommunications and ICT were being leveraged, how easy it was or how difficult it is to start a business. So I think those sorts of things help to break down the barriers between countries, as much as we are part of many regional groupings. So whether it's CARICOM and OECS and others that exist, we still are very isolated and insular in the way how we are thinking. But I think the big thing that I want us to start to appreciate, and tying it all now back into podcasts, is that we have stories to tell. We need to be able to share those things, and it helps us to be able to make the region more cohesive, but also to help us to leverage the skills and the knowledge and the expertise that we all possess. So one of the things that I think we need to recognize is just that we all are on our own journey, and this is personally, but we as businesses, in our organizations, in our countries, and sometimes we belittle, we don't think much about our own experiences, but if they were told to somebody else, they would be fascinated. There would be things that they could learn from those experiences. And it helps to bring us all closer together. So as I begin to draw my talk to a close, I really want us to think about how we can share more. We need to share more. And I think so many times we have to look at the experiences that we are having and really recognize that we need to get away from, if I win, you have to lose. If I advance, you must stay behind. One of the things, for example, that I have been doing on the podcast this year is that I've been talking about, there's a theme that I have called tech-based social enterprises. So those are tech businesses, tech nonprofits, some of them, who are focused on some sort of social good, relieving poverty, food security, addressing unemployment, health. Those are some of the areas that could probably be addressed. And it is a time where we get to learn more about how people are doing certain things. And I must say that all of my guests so far are very generous in the information that they share, in how they're sharing their experiences, and the fact that they are continually looking to collaborate and to share the message. And even for those who might want to join them in the business or the initiative. And when I say join, not necessarily that they have to join their business, but maybe to learn something and to do something similar in their own country. So many of them are very, very generous in that respect. So again, something to think about. But we also now need to collaborate more. And if we share more, we become more knowledgeable about the experiences that people are having, and consequently, how best we might be able to partner, we might be able to do certain things that complement each other or move towards a common goal. So again, something that we think about and we don't always recognize is that for us here in the Caribbean, many of the countries are very small. We have very small populations. And if you wanted to do a project, the cost of the project relative to the number of people that would be that would benefit, it may seem like a big ask. It doesn't seem as if one will be getting value for money. But when one starts to think about things like economies of scale, we can use the same amount of money or just a little bit more, but we're going to be helping so many more people, then it then starts to make more financial sense, and it then becomes something that is easy to justify, to sell to whomever you need to sell to get approval. But these are the sort of things that happen at the country level. And this is where, for example, we see the benefits of regional groupings, so the OACS and all of the organizations that fall under it. So whether or not it is ECTEL or the Civil Aviation Authority or the Central Bank, these are the things that really benefit from a collaborative approach, and something that we ought to think of moving forward. And finally, because we have to dream big, we have to dream bigger and better than what we are doing now, or what we think we can do by ourselves. It then becomes even more important that we collaborate, that we share, and that we really try to create win-wins at all costs. We have to dream big. And here, I think with podcasting, we have an excellent avenue, an excellent channel coming from the oral tradition, of which so many of us are aware. And I mean, I think, you know, in almost every Caribbean country, we have the call and response sort of things. If somebody's telling a story and they want to make sure that people are listening, you know, they might say something like, I guess like in St. Lucia, you know, idikwi, and somebody else has to respond. And I'm sure you'll know what that might be. So these are the things that I think that podcasts really help to, when we leverage podcasts, we can really help to move the Caribbean forward, to really help to jumpstart, restart, and accelerate the future of ICT and technology in the region. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them now. Thank you so much. Betty, I'll just hand it back to you. Hello?
Don't hesitate. I think if you have questions, si vous avez des questions, dans la zone Q&R, vous posez la question en français et en anglais. Si c'est en français, on va traduire pour vous, il n'y a pas de problème. If it's in English, on the Q&R zone, you can write your question and Michelle can read the question and give you answer. Comme je... J'arrive pas, j'ai pas mon ordi là en fait. Tu peux te rappeler?
Okay, I see a question here about why is it so difficult to really coordinate within our area? Now, that is, I think, what one would say is the $24 million question. It's really something. I think it is because I think we see ourselves very individually. We don't see ourselves always as a team. We are thus very competitive, and I think it is, of course, to our detriment. So it's something that we really ought to think about a little bit more. I think, though, that it is really through efforts to really share that we are not different, that we are having similar experiences, that a problem that I am having, you may have already had, and you have figured it out. But are you going to be prepared to say to me, this is how I solve my problem, maybe it can work for you? Or will you say, oh, you are having that problem? Well, you have to figure it out. Yes, I solved it for myself, but I will not help you. And I think we may be thinking very narrow-mindedly and not necessarily looking at the future and the bigger picture, that we can only survive and thrive if we do it together.
Michelle, I have a
question.
Okay, I have a question for you. You know, in the ITU, they talk about regulation, and which regulation can really impact the progress of technology, of innovation in Caribbean area for the future?
Regulation, I don't know, should we be talking about regulation though? Because what you're hoping is that we will really collaborate more. I think what the thing I want to probably say is that we have a lot of innovative people within the region. We have a lot of innovation that is happening, but there are lots of problems around the innovation. Sometimes the innovation, the solution is being developed for too small an area. We don't develop it so that it can be a global solution or a regional solution. We develop it for a very tiny problem in Jamaica or in Guadeloupe, and not necessarily something that can go beyond our borders. Our countries are too small. And so that I think is a big problem. There also is things like funding. After you've developed, you've worked so hard to come up with your little idea. How do you make it into something bigger and better? What support is there for that? And I think those are some of the issues and challenges that we have. So it may not necessarily have to do with regulation from an international perspective, but a lot of things that we in the region need to solve and to put our money where our mouth is, in the sense that we need to not just talk about, oh, we need to be innovative, but what are we doing to really drive innovation in the region? Okay.
Before you read the question, another one. Yeah, you have ICT Pulse podcast.
Yes.
Many of people you interview, they are English, and
yes.
you have some French. including mine's podcast. I just want to know, in your opinion, how we can make possible a better connection between French-spoken people to be more represented, to have more link in Caribbean zone. Could you have more collaboration for podcast with you?
Absolutely, and I am embarrassed that you called me out on it, Betty, but I recognize that, and it is my own limitation. I have been, well, I studied French in high school and so on, but I've never gotten it to the proficiency where I would feel comfortable talking, in French. It's something that I will work on, but the point, though, I do recognize that there is a challenge, and maybe it is something that we can collaborate on. I am certainly willing to, work with, for example, Guadeloupetech to develop a podcast. It could piggyback on the ICT Pulse podcast, and we can really try to come up with something that would help the French community here in the Caribbean region. So I absolutely welcome the opportunity for us to do something, and I really would want us to do it. Now that you have brought it up, let's seriously pursue it. So as soon as this event is over, I will be calling you on this matter.
Yes, I'm really happy we have a deal, Michelle.
No, absolutely.
Your partner. Sure.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're most welcome. Okay, so I'm reading from the chat.
Sure.
How can we collaborate with you or somewhere else in the Caribbean area when each island is a country with different languages? I guess that certainly goes back to your point, Betty, and to the writer Fabrice, that the language barrier is definitely a challenge, and I think certainly it is not something that we are going to be able to overcome very, very quickly. So for example, in growing up, well, I didn't necessarily grow up, spend all of my time in Jamaica as a child, but in Jamaica, when I was a child, probably the first foreign language that you would learn was actually Spanish, because Cuba was so close by, as much as Martinique is far off as well. So I think certainly within the region, we may need to consider how what we pursue at school and how we promote foreign languages at school, that it is not necessarily just an option, but something that we should be doing a lot more of, probably from very, very young primary school, where children really develop the fluency in a language other than their own, the one that is spoken in their own country, but those that are spoken in the region. Let me just see. How can we collaborate with you or somewhere, or so I guess somebody else in the Caribbean area? Okay, that's a similar one. So it is difficult. And I think though for you in Guadeloupe, for those who are members of Guadeloupetech, I think that Betty and even someone like Milan have done a fantastic job of connecting with the English-speaking Caribbean. So I think the team at Guadeloupetech could perhaps be a very, very good channel to connect with people and connect you to people within the region who are not native French speakers. So I think though that there is considerable scope for collaboration. As you heard, Betty is going to hold me to the podcast, and I'm happy that she will. And hopefully that could be one of many initiatives between Guadeloupetech and other entities that are based in the English-speaking Caribbean. Okay, I'm just reading another question. Our linguistic and administrative insularity hinders our direct relations with the Caribbean. Development of technology, innovation companies, whether financial, energy, or social, can be quite complicated when you don't know where to turn. What can you recommend? Inter-Caribbean technology exchanges remains to this day quite limited and often political. How do I weigh? Fabrice, you are so right. It is something that it's a problem. And as you said, there are very political reasons for this. But I think language is probably the biggest one. And maybe it is for us to be doing a lot more whether cultural exchanges or like trade shows or different missions to different countries, or even maybe for some having these sorts of events where for example, myself as a native English speaker gets to collaborate and also to connect with persons from the French-speaking countries more, because yes, I may know a couple of persons who are from Martinique or Guadeloupe, but I don't know the tech community here in Guadeloupe, for example, or in Martinique. So these are things I think that are really helping us if we can have more events where there is commingling, people from different cultures, who speak different languages across the Caribbean coming in and really collaborating and sharing, because it's all about the stories that we tell. As much as we are speaking different languages, so many of us across the region come from similar histories, similar cultures, and even sometimes the music is very similar, just that the language in which it is spoken or the nuances of some of the music, the cuisine, different things are very much the same, and sometimes we get caught up in the differences and not the similarities.
Okay, there is so many questions. Maybe we can take a last question about there is some organization like CARICOM. We are not an independent country, and
Yeah.
obviously, so we are overseas department of France, and we cannot, as an independent country, be a part of CARICOM. We can collaborate with the CARICOM as we always do. We can collaborate, and we are now an associate member for OCS for Eastern Caribbean countries.
Yes.
But I think we have a lot of effort to do to have pragmatism, collaboration, and not have only political, because political, they mix their stuff. There's a business, okay? They are mandatory business, and this is a part of the view. But now we need some collaboration with technical, with professional, with expert. There is expertise, and now you have another website on online tenders in Caribbean area. Maybe we can go further. Talk us about that, please.
Okay. All right. So in addition to running ICT Pulse, on which it's a blog where I discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective, as well as a podcast, there is a platform that I also manage called Project Calls. So projectcalls.com. And what I try to do there is that I collate, so I assemble project opportunities from across the Caribbean region, because I work as a consultant. And for people who work independently, you're not employed by somebody, one of the things that you find is that there are times when you have a lot of work, you can pay all your bills, you can save, you can do all sorts of things. And there are times when you have absolutely nothing coming in. But so therefore, you always have to be looking out for the next opportunity. When this job finished, do I have something else lined up? However, across the region, the search to be able to find those opportunities, it's tedious. It takes a lot of time. It could take you up to 2 hours a day doing it. But the thing though is that if you do it today, you may still have to do it tomorrow in terms of executing the search, because opportunities are coming out all the time. So what I have done is that I have this platform where I assemble the opportunities across the Caribbean region. In the French-speaking countries, I'm not sure exactly where to look for some of these opportunities, but there are some, especially from Haiti. And across the region, almost every country, there are opportunities at any given point in time. Hopefully, I'm able to find them, and what I do is that I share them there. So it is something that I think has value. And I think especially for our consultants and our contractors and service provider, people who work on their own, who are continually having to look for work, and if they don't work, they don't eat. Something like Project Cause can help to cut down the time that they have to look for the opportunities and help you to be able to use more of your time doing paid work, doing work for which you will get paid, and not necessarily spending an hour or 2 hours almost every day trying to find new opportunities, and oftentimes you will not be successful in your search. So that is what Project Cause is about. I think especially with the pandemic, for a lot of our consultants and contractors and service providers, one is maybe finding that a lot of the opportunities are beginning to dry up. They're not as plentiful as they had been before, but there's still a lot of opportunities that are coming out. So if you want subscribes, if you go to projectcause.com, there is a page where you can subscribe. There are a number of different plans that are available. And at least twice a week, email blast is done where we share the new opportunities. You can always go on the site and search. But if you are happy to just get it twice a week, we send out an email, not too often that you start to get frustrated with how many emails you're getting, but enough that at least you can keep on top of what new opportunities are coming out and whether or not you have the skills and the requirements to apply and hopefully be successful to get new projects.